Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Jake at thatfitfriend.com, and today I'll be doing my first impressions on the Under Armour Project Rock 8. So I have had a lot of comments and DMs asking about this shoe. We actually saw this shoe take a slight price decrease, which is very rare in this day and age. This model comes in at $140, and I feel like with the Under Armour Project Rock line, and also the BSR, but for this video I'm just going to talk about the core line, I feel like we've seen a good ebb and flow of models that have excelled and then models that have been a step back. And so me, like many others, actually kind of like the 7. I thought the 7 was a pretty solid shoe. I could see the utility of it for certain preferences in the gym, and I was really curious to see where they would take the 8. And so a few thoughts with this shoe. So I'm gonna start with things to like with this model. Is number one, I like that they reworked the outsole and they broke up some of this tread up here in the forefoot and they reworked the tri-base tech in the midsole. So the forefoot is a little bit more flexible than prior models, and then you also have a bit more break here in the midfoot. So while this is a stiffer and chunkier shoe, I think it does have more flexibility compared to prior models. So I do think that's an overall good thing. And then on top of that, if you like the more structured or stable feel you get from the Project Rock models with their thicker midsoles, higher stack heights, etc., then I think you will appreciate that because you still kind of get that feeling with the shoe, but there is a bit more flexibility. It doesn't take a full 2 weeks to break in and get feeling really good. So I do appreciate this reworking of the outsole tread. And then also it looks like in the tri-base tech here, they actually made it a little bit longer in this model. So it actually inserts into the heel back here a little bit deeper. I feel like that does help contribute to some of this heel stability without necessarily making it overly stiff as just mentioned. The second thing to like with this shoe is the ankle support with this model. So with this shoe, you have a rubber outsole that wraps up high on the lateral and medial side, and then you also have this TPU layer back here. This gives the boot a little bit more structure and a little bit more lockdown. So for my sled work today and for my running, I had no issues at all with heel slip and whatnot. So I do think that's a good thing with this shoe overall. And if you like a little bit more ankle structure with your shoes, I think you'll like that, especially when it comes to the back of the ankle. So running up that Achilles, if you like a little bit more structure there, you will enjoy that with this shoe. The third thing to like with this model is that the upper has been reworked to be this mesh. It's like a single piece material, and while it isn't what I would say the most breathable, it does form fit pretty well to the foot and blended with this neoprene tongue here. So we have this neoprene, it's a stretchier material. It kind of feels similar to like knee sleeves when you put those on if you've ever worn them. But I think these two elements of the upper blended with the tongue and the tongue's gusset, it gives this shoe a very snug fit. So if you like a very locked down feeling with your training shoes and you like a little bit more stability and support with your midsole and just the overall structure of the shoe, I think you will enjoy that with the Under Armour Project Rock 8. For my deadlifts today, they were plenty stable to support 405 pounds. They were lively enough for running and for some ski and for some sled work. So from an overall versatility and stability standpoint, I do see this as being a good shoe to kind of play in both worlds. Now do note, there are a few things to think about and consider with this shoe if you're on the market for a new model. So here's some things that give me pause from the jump with this shoe. Is number one, it is still a heavier shoe. It definitely feels lighter than other iterations, but the heel back here is noticeably heavier than the forefoot. Now that is pretty standard with modern day training shoes, but when you have thick stack heights like this, I feel like it can be a little bit more apparent. So just food for thought there. This does have a bit more bulk to the heel. Good thing for some folks, but I think that's going to be a limiter for others who do like more flexibility, a little bit more forgiveness with the upper, especially surrounding the Achilles and the boots. So that will be something to think about with this shoe. So despite it being a little bit more flexible, it is still a rather heavy and chunky shoe. The second thing that gives me a little bit of pause with this shoe is just its overall width. So with this shoe, what I noticed right out of the gate here is that the forefoot is a little bit more tapered than what I generally prefer with training shoes. And so that said, if you're in the narrow, medium, and E to even double E width foot, you should be okay. But if you have a 3E or wider foot, or if you just have a very blocky forefoot and you like maximal toe splay, that will be something to consider with this shoe. I have an E to double E width foot, and I was noticing that I was kind of pushing into this lateral upper up here. And you could also just see how this shoe looks with the insole comparison in my foot when just looking at that top-down view of this model. Now, that said, I do think that this upper will break in a little bit over time, and because we have this more abbreviated synthetic layer up here on the forefoot, I don't think there's going to be any really aggressive rubbing issues on the pinky toe. But for my friends out there with exceptionally wide feet, you will want to consider that with this shoe. Something that I noticed as well, so comparing this to the Project Rock 7, I almost feel like the PR7's upper was a little bit more stretchy and forgiving. This model's upper has some give, but it just doesn't have that same like elasticity feel that the PR7 had. So it is one of those things where it's like in the PR8, we now gain in security, but we lose a little bit with that stretch, especially if you need it in the forefoot. The third thing to consider with this shoe that gives me a little bit of pause is The tongue can be a little bit annoying, and that was similar to the PR7 in my opinion with this neoprene tongue. In theory, I really like it from just an overall feel and lockdown standpoint. My issue, however, is that I feel like it can feel a little bit short. Like you can see here, when this is double knotted up, this will fall down here on the top of the midfoot, but that doesn't give us a lot of wiggle room up here with the tongue. And so because we have this neoprene material, it's this wider, stretchy material, it can fold in at times if you don't lay it super well on the foot. Now, luckily there is a gusset in here to help with that, so I don't think that's gonna be a massive issue, but it is one of those like quality of life things where I'm wondering if it was brought up a little bit or if the sides were shortened a little bit, if it would actually feel a little bit better. This is just gonna be one of those shoes that I think you have to relace and lace every single workout and make sure you're really getting that tongue to lay flat on the foot so it doesn't slide around while you're training. That's just gonna be a non-negotiable in my opinion with the shoe, and because we do have this reworked upper here, it doesn't have as much give, so there's not as much of a potential to slide your foot in, slide it out, and have that tongue not move on you. So just food for thought there if that is a big ask for you, or if you plan to buy the PR8 on a daily wear basis and you just want that shoe that you could slide in and out, travel with really easily, etc. This may not be the best option for that. You might wanna look into other options. I know Under Armour has other offerings that will scratch that itch better. Now, when it comes to sizing and fit, my initial first impressions of the shoe will run true to size for most individuals, especially regarding length. I have an E to double E with foot once again, and a normal instep, normal arch. And what I found is that the length fits true in this. It did feel a little bit snug in the forefoot. And with the upper volume, it was so-so in my opinion. I think if you have a very thick, blocky foot or a very high instep, you might want to consider that with this shoe and just how much room you have. And if you have an exceptionally wide foot again, you might want to pass. I don't think sizing up will necessarily give you enough width. But that said, if you have a narrow, medium, or slightly wider foot, true to size will be a safe call. And if you are kind of concerned with that, what I would suggest is if you buy a pair, do a couple air squats in your house, do a couple of reverse and forward lunges and see how it feels, see how the toe box feels, especially when going into flexion. And then also some food for thought here is do some jump squats and see how this arch feels on your foot, because flat feet may also find that they don't necessarily love the feel of the midsole in the shoe through the midfoot. So do a home test there, and in that way you can still keep them in fresh condition in your house and still test if they're gonna work for your foot anatomy or not, or if you'll need to make a return. But all that said, the PR8 I think is a step in a good direction. I think from an overall upgrade, downgrade, this is a slight upgrade of a shoe. The PR7 was pretty solid. I would say the PR8 took like a half step forward. It's not necessarily groundbreaking. They didn't change a ton of stuff with this shoe, but I do feel like the things they did change, it kind of gave this shoe a slightly better feel regarding its overall flexibility and lockdown. Now I will have a full review coming out on this shoe very soon. In that video, I'll also compare them to the PR7 and the BSR5, so definitely stay tuned for that. But if you have additional questions in the meantime, drop them down below or hit me up on Instagram, whichever you prefer. And as always, guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.